To the Weber State Weekly Hoops Show, member of the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, a man who is undefeated in the Family Connect 4 competition, Koby Peterson. On the show today, we have a man who is undefeated in both smoking meatloaf and baking pumpkin spice bread, very relevant to this time of year, Dustin Chapman.
Shout out to the old gristmill, as well as Great Harvest for teaching me the ways of the pumpkin spice bread. But yeah, we did both on Thanksgiving, did turkey and meatloaf, and the meatloaf won out.
Wow. But yeah, old gristmill, I mean, this is a free ad right now, but man, those pumpkin bars, undefeated.
Those are undefeated. I think we can all
so
agree
good.
that those are undefeated.
Oh, yeah. And finally, we got a man who is undefeated in debates that Alex Ovechkin, Ovi, is the greatest goal scorer in NHL history, John King.
Just go back, watch some of those highlights from Wayne Gretzky in the 80s playing against goalies who have no business ever playing in the NHL, and then come back to me. That's my only evidence that I ever need. That and Ovechkin already has 19 goals as a 36-year-old and is on pace for over 50. The guy is an absolute machine.
I love the always the era argument. The era argument's always a fun one.
Well, just don't come at me with anything before goaltender started playing. He started using the butterfly style of goaltending. It's a different game. It's a totally different game.
Fair enough. On today's show, we're going to be doing a recap of the Dixie State game. It was the only game this week. So men's hoops team took a trip down to the St. George to take on the Trailblazers. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We might be joined by Senior Guard Koby McEwan for a player interview. We're going to hopefully have him on to talk a little bit about his journey from Canada to Utah to Milwaukee to Utah again. So hopefully we'll have him on shortly after the recap and chat a little bit about that. And then I've got a game for the guys. We're playing Hammer Time. I want to get their hottest takes about this hoops team. So stick around for that. It's going to be a good one. I threw a little something extra, a little something down the road for you guys. Looking forward to those hot takes. But before we get into all that, I want to encourage everybody, subscribe to the show, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. I went through and added the show to a bunch of new platforms last week, so there should be even more places to find Weber State Weekly. Go ahead and find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on social media. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We also have a YouTube channel. You can watch these episodes if you missed them. You want to see it live and in person. You're not feeling like you're getting the full effect with the podcast. Find us on YouTube. We're there as well. And then also, we've got a Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Weber State Weekly. You can become a patron and join our game day chat, which it's gonna pivot to being a lot more hoops heavy as we go into the hoop season. But we did get news that we are going to be extending the volleyball season this week. So NIVC will be in Ogden. A couple of matches for the ladies in Club Swenson. So looking forward to that. But we can talk about all of that in the Slack channel, but you got to be a patron. So patreon.com/Weber State Weekly to become one of those. And I also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Wildcat Rack. You can go to wildcatrack.com. Check out some of the apparel that exists there. We got some new designs that should be coming up soon. Now that I'm settled in Tennessee, we're going to put some new stuff out there. So check it out, wildcatrack.com. It's holiday season. Buy that perfect gift for the Wildcat fan in your life. All right, fellas, now that we've talked through all of that stuff, let's get to the game. Wildcats took the trip down to St. George, taking on Dixie State, Burns Arena. Nice arena, Burns Arena. Would you guys agree with that? It was my first time kind of seeing it on TV. I've never been there, but seemed like it was really good.
Totally. I was at one point a student of Dixie State University pre-mission. Thank you for the full academic scholarship, Dixie State, for that one semester. Attended games at Burns Arena. The take I have, the state of Utah is blessed beyond measure with good arenas. I mean, especially as we see arenas around the West from some of the conferences, I cannot think of a state, except probably North Carolina, that has more high quality basketball venues in state.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, right, because like we're saying, Burns Arena looked nice. I mean, America First Arena, whatever they call it, on the campus of Southern Utah University. That's a nice arena. Of course, we've got our own with the D. Huntsman Center is legendary, and of course the Marriott Center. I mean, I don't know what the Wolverines play in, but I've seen their gym on TV, and I think it's okay. It's not terrible. It's okay.
They play at the UCCU Center. It's nice. It's serviceable for what it is. I mean, the Spectrum's probably
and then the Spectrum.
The D Glen Spectrum's probably I want to say the worst, just in terms of like quality of building and what it is and layout, but it makes up for it with the raucous atmosphere.
Yeah, it's a hostile environment to play college basketball in, and it's an advantage to the home team, which is what you want. But yeah, I thought that the arena looked nice, and Wildcats. This is, I think, now the second season, guys. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Second season at D1, at the D1 level for Dixie State, soon to be Utah Tech. Talk to me a little bit about kind of what you saw. I want to kind of get your overall impressions before we get into some of the questions I got.
Well, I think, for only being a Division I program for, like you said, this being their second year, I think that, there are some things that Dixie State can kind of take from this moving forward. Like, I know that they're 1-5, but they do have a couple of nice players on their squad. I think Dancel leader, which, I mean, who names their kid Dancel? Like, let's just cruise right past that. I mean, that's one of the stranger names I think that I've ever seen before. But 17 points on 7 of 9 shooting, like, against. And look, we've talked about this already. This Weber State team's good. I mean, it's really good. And so anybody who's going to score 17 points against this squad is a good ball player. And so I do think that the 1-5 record for Dixie State may be a little bit deceiving. I think once they get into WAC play, I think that they'll have a little bit more success. I mean, I know that they've been traveling around. I believe that they've played Gonzaga already, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like their non-conference schedule has been particularly kind to them. So I think if you're a fan of Dixie State, I think that this is going to be a team, especially when you factor in like location of how awesome that St. George is. I think this is a team that, over the next 5 years is going to get pretty competitive pretty quickly.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I mean, like you said, go ahead, Chappie.
I would say that 100%, the commitment at Dixie State is there for athletics. They have some very nice basketball facilities, as we've talked about. They have a state-of-the-art human performance lab. They should be overtaking SUU here pretty quickly in terms of hoops, just because of the commitment. Also, just being that close to Vegas, like I remember when I went to junior college there, there was Tark was always stashing guys at Dixie to try to get them to be eligible way back in the day, and they should 100% capitalize on Las Vegas being a place and being kind of the second place where kids from Vegas want to go to school if they want to stay close to home.
Yeah, man, because I think you're right. The facilities commitment to DSU is obviously there. They're very serious. They've already got a good start with, Burns Arena is already really good. They're probably going to be making serious upgrades to their football stadium very, very soon. But yeah, I think that you're right. Their lone win this season actually coming against Southern Utah, which is already sort of a rivalry of sorts. And so it's clear that like that's going to become something. Those two schools are going to have some hot heat between them, which is nice to see. Especially if you're a school who's coming up from D2 and coming to the D1 level, and you've already kind of got this regional rival built in just up the road. Nice thing to have, but yeah, lone win coming against or coming for the Trailblazers coming against Southern Utah. So that's kind of why I'm going to be honest, guys. I'm not high on Southern Utah this season.
They're surprised. They're not doing great, surprisingly. But
it's gold.
One other thing to add on Dixie. I mean, it's just like it's a jump to go from FCS to FBS football,
sure,
or FBS to P5 football, or G5 to P5. This is going to be a jump for them. This is not something that happens overnight. We watched it in football. I mean, the biggest thing, I got to see him play New Mexico in person last year. I was down there visiting family, and they wanted to go to the game. And it's funny. You're watching guys on the court, and you're just the stature and what it was. They just weren't Division I athletes. I mean, Caliber from Pineview High and Gunster from Snow Canyon, like those guys are ballers. They're not Division I athletes. It takes a while to build up from that. It's lots of guys with the last names of Snow and Entz on their jersey. It's just they're going to be going from a regional school to something that's a little bit more than that and playing as a Division I school, and it takes a while to build that up.
Well, and it's, and if you are a Dixie State fan, in my opinion, in the ever-changing landscape of college basketball, it's something that you can do a lot quicker than you probably could, 10 or 15 years ago with the transfer portal. I mean, you can just jump in the portal. They have an attractive location as to where their school is. And I think that that's going to be something that they'll be able to sell on the recruiting front, for sure, and be able to get some some cast offs from some of the, bigger, from some schools out west. And, you can, especially in basketball. Football is a little bit different just because there's so many people on the roster, but basketball, you can really flip your team over in 1 to 2 years and then, really have something that look completely different than what you did when you started, the journey. But, because it only takes, 3 or 4 guys to totally transform a basketball team. And, with how many people go into the transfer portal, that's probably going to be the easiest way for them to do things.
Prime example of that's just watching Weber State over the past 2 years, right? I mean,
absolutely.
We all criticized Randy Ray pretty heavily a couple of years ago because things just felt stale, and credit to them. It's 2 years and raiding the portal twice, and we're undefeated and guys are looking good.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely good point, right? Like you said, Chappie, the last season, wasn't sure exactly how the Wildcat team was going to look. A painful exit from the conference tournament. Who did we lose to, like Sac State or something like that? Portland.
No, we lost to Montana, didn't we?
No. The year before that.
Oh, the year before that.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
And then that was the year that COVID stopped the tournament and all that stuff. But still, the Wildcats really struggled. And they lost in the first round of the tournament, which is, the kind of thing that rarely happens to a Weber State Wildcats team. So Coach Ray and the team get back to the drawing board. They bring in a lot of guys like Isaiah Brown, Sigo Soho Jawara, went and got Dante Bassett out of Florida. Ended up getting Cody Carlson out of, a school out of Minnesota that, probably nobody was really watching, but man, this guy can play. Getting Zaire Porter, just a number of players, right? Bringing them in and saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And then that team was, it was night and day difference. This team was obviously didn't get the result that they wanted in the conference tournament, going up against Wildcat Kryptonite in Montana, but still a good team in the conference tournament, in the conference season. And like you said, John, you can just really kind of flip a team over really quickly. And now they had built that base. And now they just bring in a couple more key guys to make up for backcourt losses. And man, we've got a team that's now 6-0 undefeated. Let's talk a little bit about the game, guys, because this was an interesting one. One thing that I noticed, and I wanted to kind of get your guys' take on this. I mean, the box score doesn't kind of really show this, but Wildcats seemed to get better shots at and around the rim in the first half. That seemed to be kind of their calling card. They were really attacking the rim, wanted to get to the rack, and I think that the free throws showed that was the case. But the ironic thing is that they ultimately actually lost the battle for points in the paint. And so I kind of wanted to see what you guys thought. Like, did you feel that was more a function of offensive rebounds? Was it just the way that they chose to play defense in the second half? Like, what did you guys see in the second half that gave the Trailblazers the opportunity to overtake the Wildcats in a key statistical category, points in the paint?
A lot of it was just the way they were playing. They, as we've seen, tends to be the trend so far this year. They start out a little slow and then turn it on, especially in the second half. The way that they were playing defense, it was a lot more up and down game in the second half. It started to get wide open, and Sigu was hitting threes left and right. and I think it just opened the game up quite a bit to where the Wildcats were absolutely fouling more. But it definitely has held true. This game held true to the pattern of, Weber was in control halfway through the first half, but it wasn't like it was still close. They didn't start running away with it until about, 12, 13 minutes left in the game.
Yeah, and we kind of, Kobe, and you and I kind of talked about this on off air, before we started the show. But Weber State kind of, it was a close first half. Box score says 41-35, but if you watch the game, you could kind of see that the Wildcats were getting the better of the looks, taking more of the high percentage shots, getting to the basket, getting to the free throw line in the first half. And you could tell, even though the score was close, that the Wildcats were the better team. And then once things got to the second half, things opened up a little bit, and that kind of let the better players shine, And so I do think that that's a really good judge of a good basketball team, just because how often are you constantly creating good looks for yourself? Because at the end of the day, shooting is gonna, it's gonna ebb and flow. Some nights you're gonna make a lot of shots, and some nights you're not gonna make a lot of shots. But to consistently create high percentage looks, that's the sign of a good team, because that is what's going to, that's what's going to allow for a deep run in a conference tournament. That's what's going to allow for, a lot of wins in the conference season, because all those things kind of work themselves out. And I think if you're a Wildcat fan, I think that's something you have to really, really, really be impressed with so far early on in this season.
Yeah, it's a good point, John. Like you said, creating high quality looks so that you have a greater opportunity, because, I mean, anybody who watches basketball knows that, a wide open three is very, very different from, a contested jumper, right? And I think that the Wildcats have done a very good job of setting up the offense there's a lot of movement if you watch, guys. It's not very stale. It's not a lot of, all right, we're just going to try and spread the floor, and then we're going to send a guy in and just let the defense try and collapse on him, kick out, and shoot the three. The offense is very, very different this season, where there is a lot of probing, right? You'll see guys trying to, find their way in, and you have a couple of guys who are really aggressive. I was really impressed with JJ Overton's play. I thought that he was really aggressive, taking the ball to the rack. He was really good on defense. And then the other guy I was going to mention was Koby McEwan, who, same thing, when he had the ball in his hands and he was getting downhill, he was going to the rack. Like, there was no doubt in anyone's mind where he was going to try and go, and he wasn't going to try and kick out to somebody. But then there were other times where you could see the chemistry with the team already taking shape. And I think this is also a part of having veteran guys come in who understand how to play the game and how to help out in some of those situations. So, for example, McEwan is driving, JJ Overton, who's standing in the corner, ready to shoot the three, which they shot very well. Those corner threes fell pretty well for the Wildcats in this matchup. But Overton cuts back door as McEwan cuts. The defense commits 2 and, might have been 3 defenders. And then he just skip passes it to the undefended Overton, who makes an easy layup, right? Those kinds of plays happen consistently. It happened with Overton. It happened with Carlson. It happened with lots of guys where they were cutting while the other man was cutting. And so it creates this opportunity where now the defense has to pick, are they going to go with the cutting McEwan, or are they going to, go back here with the guy who's cutting back door and try and keep the ball away from him, or at least contest the shot that's coming? And it's a difficult thing for the defense, because then they're either going to foul or they're going to have to pick their poison, and they're going to get a high percentage shot. And so I would say that the offense looks completely different from what we saw last season, and it's working, right? Because of course they are hitting shots. We they're hitting shots at a high percentage right now, but there's also a lot of movement, not only of the ball around the horn and finding the open man, because we saw some of that too, but also you're finding guys moving around within the offense to create opportunities, setting screens, getting good open looks like you're talking about, John, where it's like pass, and there's a guy who's wide open behind the arc, and so he's going to take the three because it's not a contested jump shot.
Well, and just to kind of jump in real quick there as well. This is a direct correlation to having a lot of ball handlers on this team. And when you look at the squad, when you look at the better players, whether it's Sigu, whether it's Koby McEwan, whether it's JJ Overton, Zahir Porter, even Dylan Jones Dylan Jones to a certain extent. Wow. There's a lot of guys that can handle the basketball, which makes things really, really tough to defend. I mean, we kind of talked about this again off air before we got on the show, but I feel like a couple years ago when we had Jarek Harding, Jarek Harding was the ball handler. He was that, high usage guy who pounded the rock, and that was the offense. But when you have a lot of guys that can handle the ball and then play make, along with that, that just makes your offense, so much easier to run because, it's just so much harder to defend. I think that's, especially since we have transitioned to this kind of pace and space, generation of basketball where, the offense is all dependent on, running things at a high tempo and a lot of movement, but then making sure that you're keeping that spacing to let people, be creative and do different things with the ball and making it harder on defenses to help and all those types of things. Like having a lot of playmakers is something that is becoming more. This is at every level of basketball. Having a lot of playmakers is becoming more and more necessary if you want to be a good team.
Yeah, and I think going back to build on your point, I mean, for 3, 4, 5 years now, it's been Weber State has not had the varied scoring options that they have right now. It was better last year. It was better last season. Isaiah Brown, Cody Carlson, we had scores, but what always seems to have gotten us over the past 3, 4, 5 years is we were one dimensional, meaning if the threes weren't falling, there was a good chance we were going to lose the game because we didn't necessarily have the ability to change it up. And this year it just feels different where McEwan and Overton specifically can take the ball by anybody and go to the rack. And that capability just opens up a whole other dimension on offense where we're not so dependent on the three-pointer, where it becomes, Koby, like you're talking about, corner threes that are great for kick out passes, but they're not our bread and butter. And then throw in, our tall guys, throw in Carlson, and I'm hopeful when Bassett gets back, he'll be the same thing. And our gentleman from Great Britain, Alex too. Like I believe the difference this year with this Wildcat team is going to be that we are multidimensional on scoring, and it's going to open up a lot of things. If threes aren't falling, it's not going to be a rough night. Dylan Jones mentioned that last week, right? He's mentioned that it was like, oh, if this guy's not on, it's going to be a rough night. Like it doesn't have to be that. And I think that's what's always done the Wildcats in, especially in the Big Sky tournament. You run up against a team and the shots aren't falling, they do something and game's over.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about taking care of the ball because it felt like to me in the first half the Wildcats they were just trying stuff, right? Like they weren't really in any dire straits. The game was close. They're up a couple of points for most of the first half, and so they're trying some passes that maybe they wouldn't normally, cross court stuff, just to kind of keep the ball moving. And it felt like turnovers in the first half kind of piled up and allowed the Trailblazers to stay in it because they were turning the ball over a fair bit themselves. They ended up with 18 on the night, which credit to the Wildcat defense. We'll talk a little bit about that. But for the Wildcats, it seemed like they ended up cleaning that up in the second half, taking much better care of the ball, still sharing the ball at a fairly high clip, but also making sure that they weren't taking those riskier passes that they had taken in the first half. And I kind of wanted to get your guys' take on that. Like, did you feel that there was concerted effort in the second half to take care of the ball more? And if so, how did it manifest itself in your view?
Yeah, I'll jump in and just say that they definitely were. The game was more open in the second half, right? But they were definitely trying to take care of the ball, and it did slow things down at a certain point, especially once they got up. But it's always, we've talked about it a couple of times on the show already, but it feels like they absolutely up the defensive intensity in the second half, and that's ultimately what helps the offense pull away.
Yeah. What about you, John? What do you think?
To speak really quickly on that defensive intensity, and I think this is going to continue to be a theme for the Wildcats over the season. I think that this is a stat that we should definitely be watching. Is points off turnovers. I mean, the Wildcats had 25 points off turnovers, which is really that's a really good number. That's for forcing 18 turnovers, like that's a super efficient pace, to be playing at. So, I think that's going to be a key stat because we did talk a little bit last week about the one thing that the Wildcats have kind of struggled with so far this year has been rebounding. and clearing the defensive glass. But one way that you can account for not great rebounding numbers is from forcing turnovers and then getting points off those turnovers, because at the end of the day, it's all about creating extra possessions.
No, yeah, fair point. And like you said, John, I mean, the margins show themselves, right? The Wildcats ended up with 25 points off of turnovers. The Dixie State Trailblazers only had 10. And of course, like, there were opportunities. There were, the margin of turnovers was only 7, 18 to like 11. But Wildcats just cashed in on those opportunities. And I think that a lot of that is the quality of turnover, right? Because Wildcats were getting a lot of deflections, a lot of, the kinds of deflections that create fast break points, and high percentage shots at the rim. So whereas, maybe the Trailblazers were getting more the kind of turnover that they were getting a guy who was driving in the paint, the ball came off his leg, or they got their hand in a passing lane or something like that. But they were much deeper into the court, and the ball wasn't, bouncing out. And so they weren't able to just pick it up and run, even though they did run a fair bit in the second half. It seemed to be where they were getting their success, especially when it came to points in the paint. But they weren't getting the same types of turnovers that the Wildcats were. And I think that's why you see that disparity. I want to turn now, guys, to talking a little bit about, we talked about attacking the rim, but I want to talk about the results of that, which are going 10 of 13 at the free throw line. It feels different. It feels different than years previous, where the attack of the rim creates more of these free throw opportunities, because obviously we know that Cody John and Jarek Harding were prolific scorers at the basket. They were guys who got to the free throw line. Last year, Isaiah Brown was very good at doing that, right? But I don't know, does it feel different to you guys this year? This attacking the rim and getting to the free throw line, because it does to me. And I think the reason it feels that way is because it feels like it happens earlier in the shot clock. It's not a desperation. It's more deliberate, as opposed to being something that, okay, this play broke. Okay, this is just how we're going to run it. I mean, John King, what do you think? Is there a difference in the types of plays that are getting the Wildcats to the free throw line this season?
Well, I think the difference is that there's more people that can do it, which, we've talked a lot about, variability on offense, and not necessarily, if you're scouting the Wildcats and trying to game plan against them, good luck right now, because it's just, you have so many guys that can hurt you in a variety of different ways. And I think that's just so, like, that's such a big deal. That's such a big deal for this team. So I think that, it just makes things easier, just because there's so many guys that can, that can get there. I mean, they can get all the way to the basket, but that just, I think that and I think that's going to be big, because there are going to be nights. I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about the 3-point shooting at some point. The 3-point shooting has been lights out so far this season, through 6 games. But there's going to be nights where that's not the case, and so you're going to have to make up for that by getting to the free throw line, by getting easy baskets in the paint. And I think that that's something that the free throw numbers, while the Wildcats haven't shot the best percentage from the free throw line so far this season, only shooting about 68%. I do think that number is going to go up, but getting those, the number of attempts that the Wildcats have been able to get so far, that's a big deal. And once again, that's another sign of a good basketball team.
Well, and it's what it shows is we always use the term on the show, hero ball, right? Like there's less hero ball this year because there's more heroes, just like you said, John. There's more guys, it feels like, that can do it, and it doesn't feel like there's a Jarek Harding where it's him and 4 other guys, and he's the main one. It doesn't feel like there's, we certainly see that Koby McEwan seems like he's the leader of the team, but it's not like he doesn't feel like he's the alpha, the dominant player, the only guy that's going to get the ball and score, which is what we've had. And even last season, I mean, Isaiah Brown is was an absolutely phenomenal player, but there were times where we watched him have to take over the game or have to try to take over the game. And nothing this year has felt like that yet. Doesn't feel like there has to be anybody taking over because there's more guys that can take over.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it already, guys scoring. I mean, I have a note in here, 5 Wildcats in double figures in this one. Sigu led the way with 23 points. I think he led all scorers. But, I mean, a number of guys, and we've talked about it now, this is the second week in a row that we're talking about the variability, like John said, and the opportunity that Wildcats have to hurt you in a number of different ways. Because I'll say that, Dylan Jones had a little bit of an off night. He had some early foul trouble, which, I mean, some of those fouls were really, like, seriously, like, there was an offensive foul that was like, wow, that's something. So part of that, the refs kind of taking him out of the game, but also, struggles hitting shots that normally fall for him. But even still, like, 5 guys in double figures, and it makes all the difference, and I'm checking out this stats here. Yeah, like the Trailblazers didn't have anybody score more than 17. Their next closest scorer was only 11. They only had 2 guys in double figures, So it just shows the depth that the Wildcats possess this season and their ability to hurt you so many different ways if a guy is having a bad night. One last thing I wanted to talk about. Well, we've talked about that. Chappie, I wanted to bring you in because you had a point to make about in-state games, because I felt like this was a good in-state game. This was a game that I think the Wildcats should continue to schedule. It's a good one. But what are your thoughts on in-state games?
Man, Utah has such a unique opportunity here. And look, I know that the tournament at the Delta Center didn't work out, and it didn't work out.
Delta Center threw it out. Old school.
That's what it is. That's what it always will be.
That's Utah clout right there. That's a dude who was there.
Right. But like, it didn't work because of the format. Just having teams play, it needed to be a tournament. It needed to be a round robin tournament style thing for it to work. They couldn't get anybody to agree to that, so they didn't do it. But folks, there's 7 Division I basketball schools in this state now. Right? That is an amazing number. That is a number that, again, very few other states, especially states with the population that Utah has, just doesn't exist. So we need to be playing the in-state games, and the teams that aren't playing the in-state games, I'm calling you out, Utah. Like,
it's Utah, right? Everybody else is playing.
Like, quit feeling like you're better than everybody else and play. Just play. They make the preseason fun. As we get into conference play, I enjoy conference play, but the preseason, looking at December and knowing that we have BYU and Utah State at home, like, that's fun. And if knowing that, I don't know when, I think we're just going to apparently play at Dixie in all sports for like the end of time. I don't know what
next year. It's happening next year. They come to Ogden next year.
I'm not sure what our athletic department did to decide that, we're going to let a school move up and play there for 2 years in a row in both sports, but whatever, that's beside the point. These games are fun and they're entertaining, and it's unique to Utah. So they need to be played, and they need to be something fun. I hope that as Brigham Young transitions into, a bigger league, that they don't start big time in schools too. You don't get the feeling that they're going to do that, but Utah sure did. And it's lame. Play the in-state games, man. Like, have fun with it. Let them be fun.
Yeah, because they are fun, right? I mean, we've seen with Dixie State, we've seen with obviously Southern Utah. I hope that that's a series that will continue and at least be, obviously, them being in the conference. There were 2 games on the slate each season with them. Hopefully it's at least one. It'll probably only be one, but hopefully that's something that continues, and I think that it will. But beyond that, I mean, Utah State has never been a team that's like, oh, we're not going to play. Like, they'll play. And like you said, Chappie, even Brigham Young going on to the Big 12, they have not shirked playing the in-state games. They've played, they just played Utah last week, and obviously that's a game that they're going to play, but they'll be playing us, and they're coming to the D. They're coming to the Purple Palace, and they'll play Utah State. And so I wonder if Craig Smith, there's sort of the changing of the guard down in Salt Lake is going to change that and maybe soften the view of what they think should happen when it comes to playing the in-state teams, because it's fun, and I think that it's competitive. even a team like UVU can beat you on a given night. I mean, I was there when they beat the Wildcats in the Purple Palace. Obviously not happy about that happening, but it happened, and it just goes to show that anybody can beat anybody in college basketball on a given night.
Well, and there's a pecking order. And look, it's in general, Weber State is not competing against Utah for the same recruits, right? Like there's a pecking order to this. And I think that's probably why they don't want to do it. But I mean, just play the games. Let the kids have fun and let them, take the short bus ride somewhere. Why be playing other Big Sky or West Coast Conference schools and not playing the schools in your own state? I mean, take the regional games and make them in state. There's a lot of them to have, and it makes the November, December games a whole lot more fun than playing Northwest Baptist State. Yellowstone. That was our other one. Yellowstone.
Oh, yeah, Yellowstone.
That wasn't even close to Yellowstone. Like Billings is not close to Yellowstone.
Well, I think that if college basketball continues at the clip that it had this season in the state of Utah, it's actually sort of a nice resume builder for those teams that can kind of separate themselves within the state and beat some of those in-state teams, because they can point to those in-state games and say, yeah, we did beat a good, Utah State team, or we did beat a good, SUU team or Utah or whatever, because then they can say, yeah, we did those things and it's not a minus. We beat them. It's not holding us back. It's not like we played an NAIA school. Like, that's a quality program and we got the dub. And so good to see it. I want to transition now, guys. I want to go to our game, which is Hammer Time. Hottest takes. I want to hear you guys' hot takes, because it's been a hot start for this Wildcat team. And so wanted to bring this game back and kind of see where you guys are at right now in this young season. And so I want to talk about the offense specifically. John King, I want to start with you, man. What is your hottest take for this Wildcat offense?
Well, I don't really consider this to be a super hot take, because I do think this is going to be a true take over the course of the year. But I think I think with the number of shooters that this team has, I think this team's going to shoot higher than 40% from beyond the arc on the season. I think that you're going to be looking at, when we're running the statistics at the end of the season, I think you're going to be looking at one of the better three-point shooting teams in the country. I'm not going to say that they're going to be in the top 10, but they're going to be a lot closer to the top 10 than they are to, the bottom half. So I think this is one of the best. I truly believe this is one of the better three-point shooting teams in the country, just because there are so many different guys who can shoot it. And I think that that's going to be something that we continue to, watch throughout, the year, because I think that that's going to be a big part of what makes this Wildcat team go.
Yeah, I got to agree with you there, John. Not necessarily the hottest take, because like you said, this team, I mean, they shot 45% in that game against Dixie State. I'd have to look up the number on what they're shooting. Well, but it's high.
Cats are shooting 39.5% from beyond the arc on the season. So, I think that number is going to climb. I mean, it's not going to be, 45%, because nobody shoots 45%. But I do think that is really something that that we're going to be watching towards the end of the year, because I think that we're going to be towards the top of, I think we're going to be towards the top of three-point shooting in the entire country come the end of the year.
Yeah, that's fair. Chappie, what about you? What's your hottest take for this Wildcat offense?
So it's going to sound like I'm bandwagoning here because he was the leading scorer last game, but I think that Sigu is going to end up being our high score on average in offense this year. He's going to lead the team in average scoring, and he's not going to be the high scorer every night, but he's going to benefit from just what we talked about. He's going to benefit by hanging out at the three-point line when Koby McEwan drives or JJ Overton drives, and he's going to be out there waiting for it, and he can hit that shot. Also, you can just tell, and it was so much fun. We need to have him back on the show. It was so fun when we interviewed him last year, because you could just see a kid. We all wondered at the start of the year why Randy was still playing him, because he just was having so many off nights, but you could see that it was where he came from. You could see that he was homesick, and that, he had not a great experience where he was at before he transferred to Weber, and he just needed to feel comfortable. And we saw him come on the second half of last year as he got comfortable here. And, he's clearly comfortable here now. And we're going to see that kid just, to me, he's going to be the leading scorer on offense this year.
Guys, these are not very hot takes.
That's hot. I think most people would pick Koby McEwan to be your leading scorer this year.
I don't know, man, because I think that you're right. That Sigu has really shown himself to be an apt scorer. He's very efficient when he scores, and he's also shooting the ball really well from behind the arc. And so he's a presence that they have to respect, and they have to go out and guard him. But he also, I think that his mid-range game has maybe taken a step up this season already, because it feels like he's hitting sort of these Mike Conley-esque floaters, from 14, 15 feet out, that are just like, that's a tough shot to block, because it's just perfectly placed that you can't touch it. But I want to go now, guys, to the defensive side of the ball. John King, I want to get your hottest defensive take with this Wildcat squad.
I think that, I don't know if I've definitely mentioned it off air, but I haven't mentioned it. I'm not sure if I've mentioned it on the podcast yet. I do think that the Wildcats are still without maybe their best defensive player in Dante Bassett. And I think that once he comes back, I think you're going to be looking at a team that, with the way that they play perimeter defense, with especially with someone like Dylan Jones kind of leading that charge, as someone who can kind of do it all on the defensive end. That's gonna lead the conference in defense more than likely this year. Like I think that I think Dante adds an aspect to this team that is just, with rim protection and athleticism, and just that anchor that allows the offense to that allows the defense to just be that much more aggressive on that end of the floor, forcing turnovers, and really being able to get up in the grill of somebody, of some of these opposing teams. I think the defense has been really good so far, but when he comes back, it's going to be, in my opinion, a monumental job.
Okay. Hope to see it. Chappie, what about you? Your hottest defensive take for this one?
I'm scared now. I'm scared if it's going to be hot or not. My hot take is that it's not going to be Dante who's going to be our down low defensive presence this year. It's going to be our guy, Buckets Carlson, there, that generally is more of a scoring threat, less defensive. But if you've watched him in this preseason, he's leaner, guys. Like he's lost some weight. He's leaner and more trim, and he's definitely more nimble and agile going around the court. And I think that that's going to get him and keep him on the court more. You can already see that it's taking time from our guy Michael Kozak, who's been at the program since before we were all born. But it's I think Cody Carlson's going to take the step up because of his clear off-season work and be the big defensive presence, be a bigger defensive presence this year.
No, footwork is important, and like you said, Chappie, I mean, being a guy who has dropped maybe a little bit of weight, maybe add a little bit of muscle, added some agility, that's obviously going to play well for a defender. I got to tend to agree with John, though, man. When Dante Bassett comes back, this is going to be quite the team, because not only does Dante Bassett play really good defense, he can shoot the three. That's just one more guy out there that can spread the floor that they have to go out and guard. Yeah, Carlson hit a few threes in this last game against Dixie State. Bassett can do the exact same thing.
And maybe, just maybe, the Big Sky refs will be used to Dante this year, and they won't call him for 5 fouls within 3 minutes of being on the court.
Holy cow, no kidding. John King, you got anything to add to that?
No, I was just going to say, I think that was one thing that was really impressive with Dante last year. I think he averaged around 9 points a game. As someone who, when he was recruited here, I don't think any of us really thought that he was going to be anything on the offensive end. I mean,
right.
Less than 2 points a game at Florida. So that's also a really nice added piece that he will bring this team when he finally does return.
I think it's just a tip of the cap to the coaching staff at Weber State. Just getting guys in, developing them, seeing something in them, spending the time developing guys, not just somebody who can just come in with raw talent and start to score, but really getting guys ready to play and helping them get better. I think that's why if you're thinking about coming to Weber State, that's a good reason why. Last one, guys, really quickly. I want to hear your conference tourney hot take. Chappie, let's start with you. Real quick.
Is it a hot take? They're going to win the tournament. We're going to the NCAA tournament this year. I don't know how hot of a take that is, saying an undefeated team, but we haven't been there for a while, and we're gonna crush Montana. Travis DeCura mentions always that specifically last year that he recruits to beat Weber State. Weber State's got a lot more dimensions to them this year, so I don't think Montana is going to be able to be the kryptonite that they've been.
All right, Wildcats win the conference chip. John King, what do you got?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a hot take, but I think in the early season, I think we're definitely the favorites. And so I think that look, one thing I'm really excited about, this year, and I know when we wrap the show that you'll talk about this, Koby, but I'm excited for this little early conference play teaser that we have this week. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I know that conference, we don't normally get in the mindset of conference play until after New Year's, but we are going to have to be in the mindset this week. But I am excited about that because at the end of the day, the non-conference schedule is nice, all of those things, but conference play is where your season is decided. So really excited to see both the game against Northern Arizona and Portland State this week, because that's where that's where we're going to stack up. That's where we're going to, when we look back at the season here at the end in a couple months, we'll be saying, oh, we did this in the conference like that, and because of that was a good season. And so I'm very excited for both games this week. I think it's going to, if you're in Ogden, which I know not everybody is, but get out to the D and make sure that you're there, to show some support. Because the games that count, they start in 3 days.
Yeah, and I think athletics ran a thing this weekend where they were having some kind of ticket deal where it's like you could get tickets to both games for some really cheap price, like $20, $25, something like that.
It's going yes, it's $25 for Utah State, BYU, and Fresno State.
Oh, I thought it was there was a friends and family thing that they ran.
Oh, there is this week. That's right. Yeah. There's another one as well this week where it's 5 for $35.
Yeah, there you go. That's what it is. Yeah. So it's like a get everybody out to the D kind of thing.
That's great.
All right, guys. Well, let's talk about the upcoming schedule and wrap up the show. Like John noted, this Thursday, December 2nd, men's basketball is going to be taking on NAU in the D. That'll be at 7:00 up at the Purple Palace, ESPN Plus, and 103.1 The Wave. Women, of course, if we're playing in conference, that means the women will be hitting the road and going down to Flagstaff, taking on the Northern Arizona Jacks down there. That game will be at 6 p.m. ESPN Plus. Then Saturday, December 4th, Portland State comes to town with their new coach. And we're going to see how that works out. That game will be at 7 p.m., I believe. And then women, of course, taking the trip down to Portland, or they're taking the trip. Man, a rough week for the ladies. They got to go to Northern Arizona, then they got to go up to Portland. Man, I hope they're flying. That's a heck of a bus ride. That game will be on ESPN Plus on Saturday. Then Wednesday, December 8th, men's basketball taking the trip to Pullman. Wildcats taking on Washington State in the Palouse. Going to be 8 p.m. Pac-12 Network and 103.1 The Wave. And the ladies on the road again at Colorado State in Fort Collins, 6 p.m. I didn't see any place where you could watch that game, but just so you know, Wednesday, December 8th, both those games happening. So that's the upcoming schedule for hoops, both men and women's. Go ahead and email us, WeberStateWeekly@gmail.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We've got the Patreon, patreon.com/WeberStateWeekly. And we've got a blog. I think I'm going to do some content, do some recruit interviews, and I'm going to be releasing those to our patrons first. So they will get a chance to view them a few days before everybody else. So if you want to be in on that, patreon.com/WeberStateWeekly. But we'll have some more content up on WeberStateWeekly.com soon. All right, fellas, It's good times. Good to chat with all of you guys. Really appreciate the time. Let's wrap it up like we usually do. Weber State, Weber State.
Great.
Great.
Great. Go Wildcat.